Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Goldfish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. Today is Saturday, June 30th, 2018. And this is a very special Goldfish Report. And you know, we usually report on such heavy topics going on in the world today. And what's really, really nice is when we get to have a topic that's very inspirational, very enlightening, and very, enriching for people. And that's what we have for you today. So if you think that a simple that you're for the people who are a little bit tired of their normal meditations, boy, do we have something for you today. And to help me talk about this is our co-host, as you know him as the Grand Master of the Ancient Order of Ascended Hillbillies, our friend Winston Trout, to help us talk about this topic. How are you, Winston?
I'm doing okay. I'll keep my mouth shut. This is the subject that I really don't have much on, but I think it's going to be a very good topic.
Well, Winston talked about this during one of our Country Roads reports, and this just absolutely fascinated me. And so to talk about this as someone with firsthand experience who knows about doing what's called a walking meditation. And some of you may know this also as a pilgrimage, but the incredible spiritual, I guess you would say, enlightenment and transformation that one can experience through doing a walking meditation is something that I hope our guest, Pat Becken, who is joining us today, is going to share with us and enlighten for us all. So, Pat, welcome to the Goldfish Report.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
I'm so excited because I know that Winston does know about this, and so he's going to have a lot to contribute. But I did get to talk to you ahead of time, and I just wanted to press the record button because I couldn't get enough of the information you were telling me. We're talking about what you had said to me was you called this a walking meditation, and some people know it as a pilgrimage. Can you first start by explaining what it basically is and how you got involved in it? And then we're going to talk about the transformational aspect of it in more detail, because I think that's ultimately where it goes.
Well, right now, I probably would give a definition different than when I initially decided that I wanted to walk a pilgrimage. But in general, in my opinion, a pilgrimage is a walk to a holy or sacred site. So when you walk pilgrimage, you need to have a destination. Otherwise, you're just walking, you're meandering, you're wandering. So, so a pilgrimage is a walk to a holy or sacred site. And of course, the definition of a holy or sacred site could, run the gambit of things. So it's personal. I kind of equate it to to a degree, to your wedding ceremony. It's unique unto you. You create it. You make it meaningful to you. In general, the objective, obviously, with a marriage ceremony is to, at the end of your ceremony, to feel like you've made this announcement, this connection, this commitment. So there are all kinds of pilgrims out there. You can be an armchair pilgrim. I used to work as a nurse, and one of my favorite clients, I should say, which she was in her own home, was this woman named Gwen. And she had very poor short-term memory. And she had a nephew who cared for her and or managed her affairs, I should say, because he didn't live with her. But he bought her a big widescreen TV, and he literally taped the clicker onto a big piece of cardboard with arrows, telling her how to work the remote. And every day, she had it basically programmed on the Travel Channel. And every day she felt like she went somewhere. So, there are all kinds of pilgrims out there. There's bus pilgrims, walking pilgrims, traditional pilgrims. And by that, I mean someone who walks by foot. And that's what I do. So how I got started was And this is the beauty of pilgrimage, because I feel that once you get the inspiration, the inkling, the aha, or whatever, that's really the beginning of your pilgrimage. So, but then as time went on, different aspects unfolded. So once you make that decision that this is something that you want to experience, my experience has been, and I've talked to many pilgrims who have agreed with me, the universe starts lining up to make your objective happen. And once you're outside of it, I mean, you have your, I don't know how to put it, your wow, holy cow, that's what that was about. And, but you have to have a sense of humor about it. For instance, I thought that my inspiration to walk my first pilgrimage, which was the Camino de Santiago, which is a 1,000-year-old pilgrimage. And the objective of that one is to walk to the tomb of St. James the Greater. He was one of the apostles, and there were two St. James. One was called James the Greater and James the Lesser, simply because one was older than the other, and that was the terms they used then. But what happened was I had to go pick someone up at the airport. And this was 2011. So I had to go pick someone up at the airport. And where I live outside of Portland, Oregon, was about, well, I'd say 20 miles southwest of Portland. Well, the airport is about 20 miles northeast of Portland. So I was in Portland, and I thought, I'm not going to drive home, wait 30 minutes, and then turn around and drive back. So I love going to the movies, and there's a theater downtown that I particularly like, and they will have a synopsis in the lobby of the theater. So I was already downtown. I went into the lobby. I started reading the synopsis, and I saw this one fit perfectly into the amount of time I had, and Martin Sheen was in it. And I thought, oh, I like Martin Sheen. And it was called The Way. And so I read the synopsis, and I thought, sounds interesting. Fits in the time. Martin Sheen, this works. So I went up and bought my ticket. And so I'm watching this movie. And actually, have you seen the movie? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I haven't. I just recently heard about it, but I didn't see it. No.
Okay. So long and short of it, the movie is really about the relationship between a father and son. And spoiler alert, the son and the father have a difference of opinion. And the young man, who happens to be Emilio Estevez, his real life son, Martin Sheen's real life son. Mm-hmm. And apparently he wrote and directed this movie as well. But anyway, so the long and short of it is Emilio Estevez wants to go off and walk the Camino de Santiago, and his father thinks he should stay home and get a job. Mm-hmm. And so sadly, this is the spoiler alert, in the beginning of the movie, Emilio Estevez dies on the Camino. Oops. Yeah.
So on the pilgrimage, you're saying?
Correct. Okay. Correct. Like within the first day or so. Oh my. And having walked that particular one, I could see the possibility of that happening. But anyway, so Emilio Estevez ends up going to Spain and walking in his stead. So really, the Camino de Santiago is the background of the movie. But while I was watching the movie, I was thinking to myself, what is this? The Camino de what? Where? I've never heard of this. And, being a little arrogant, I'm thinking, I've lived in Europe. I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I went to a Catholic college. Why have I never heard of this? And so I found myself having to come back to the storyline of the movie because I was watching the background. So, there was like I was watching two movies. And it's a great movie, don't get me wrong. I highly recommend it. But anyway, So I walked out of this movie and I thought, wow, I'm going to put that on my bucket list. And I thought, I'm going to look into this. This is interesting. So this was November, I believe, of 2011. And I mean, it really kind of had me in a little bit of a quandary. It was one of those movies that just kind of hung around. There was this kind of residual sense after I came out of the movie. And I thought about it more, and I'm not very tech savvy, but I can Google, you know. And so I thought, I'm gonna Google that. Anyway, so then I didn't say a word to anybody that this was rolling around in my mind. And I'm not saying, you know, I was, you know, every waking moment, or I was going to bed thinking about it, or waking up thinking about it. I just thought, interesting. I want to look into that. That fascinates me. And because I've always liked to walk. I was one of these people that I have, my dad was Irish, and he was a short, stocky guy. So I got his short, stocky legs. I'm a total weenie with upper body strength, but I've always liked to ski and hike and run and walk and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, you know, this sounded like something I'd be interested in, a pilgrimage. I've never really heard of such a thing. I mean, I've heard the term, and could I define it? I don't know. Pilgrims, aren't those the people that came across the ocean and, you know, wore the funny hats and buckles on their shoes and
Right.
you know, I'd squash with the natives. So anyway, so I don't know. I just, for long and short of it, a couple months later, I go to a friend of mine. She had done a favor for me, and she's a very good friend. She's like a sister to me. And so I did this favor, and she was like, well, let me give you some money for that. I'm like, oh my God, Jennifer, I want your money. Don't be silly. Of course not. And she was like, well, I really so appreciate blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's okay. Love you, sis. Thank you. And so then like shortly thereafter, she calls me and she says, hey, Pat, I'm at Rocking Horse Bookstore. Excuse me. Is there any book that you would like? And I knew what she was doing. You know, she wanted to do something in return. And I thought, okay, I'm going to let her have that. And I said, sure. Anything by Shirley MacLaine, except I'm all over that because I had just gotten that book as a Christmas gift. And she said, oh, okay, great. So then I kind of forgot about it. And a week or so later, I'm at her house for some reason, and I'm hanging out, and then I'm leaving, and she went, oh, before I forget. And she had a package on the step by her front door in a bag. And she goes, I got this for you. I got you a book. And I said, oh, great, thanks. And I pulled the book out of the package, and it was The Camino by Shirley MacLaine. Exactly.
Ooh,
Thank you.
by Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah.
I keep thinking Weezer from, you know, Steel Magnolias, but go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah. I love her.
Yeah, you gotta love her.
Yeah, and I have this like personal connection to a degree, which is another story, to Shirley MacLaine. But anyway, it's another story.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm like, wow, I can't believe you're giving me this book. And she said, oh, why? Did you already know about or something? And I said, no. So this was the first time, excuse me, I spoke the words out loud that I want to walk the Camino. And she was like, oh, yeah, it sounded really interesting, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I read the book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she didn't know. That's the thing.
Oh, I see.
This was the first time I'd said out loud to her I wanted. Yeah.
Oh, that's why you said that. You know, what you were saying before, though, was that when you get the thought in your mind that all of a sudden all this synchronicity, the universe kind of gets behind you and starts to
right.
This is
right.
This is how it unfolds. Exactly.
Yeah.
Lovely.
This is the first thing that happens. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Wow, what a coincidence. Holy moly. You know, it's like we have ESPN. We're so in tune to each other. And my friend and I, because we're pretty tight. So anyway, I tell her about this and we laugh about it. So probably like you, I have a stack of books next to my bed lined up because people give me books. Oh, you got to read this. And I like books. I prefer books over reading on the internet and my phone, although I'm getting a little better about that. But at the time. So I have a stack of books, and I kind of have them in order in which I'm going to read them next. However, Jennifer had given me this book, and I'm amazed that I have it. So I read it right away. So I finish it, throw it on my shelf. Time to, okay, what's my next book that I'm going to read? Because I like to read before I go to sleep. It's how I fall asleep. I pick up the next book, which is a book somebody else had given me a long time ago, which I remember it sounded interesting. So it went to the sacred space instead of on my shelf, my general shelf. It went to the sacred space of on the table next to my bed, which meant it has contention to be read in the fairly near future. So I pick up the next book, and lo and behold, it's about two women hiking in Europe on the Camino, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, this is amazing.
And you're like, thank you, universe, because this
Yeah.
is coming. These are your these are
Yeah.
your guide, these are your stepping stones. You're supposed to step here and step there, and yeah.
Right. It was incredible. I mean, I think back on it now, and it's other funny little things happened as well.
But this is part of the whole thing, though, from what I understand. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that this is a spiritual journey, and some people just get stuck in meditation and just you can go beyond regular meditation. You can look for different kinds of spiritual experiences, and I love how you're describing how this is unfolding, because this is a journey, a spiritual journey, and so I wanted to just kind of point that out, because we're all at this point. I think there's a lot of people who are in this waking up community mode, who are looking for something beyond just your simple meditation. And this couldn't be more validation that when you're when you're doing things that's aligning with your purpose, or your highest good, I should say, that all these synchronicities begin to happen. So it's beautiful.
Right. And it kind of like makes you chuckle. It made me chuckle and think, oh, what a coincidence. But as time went on, I mean, I really believe that there are no such thing as coincidences. Every moment, every experience we have that we draw to us has a meaning. Do I sit here and, mentally debate every single thing that happens? No. But one thing that, as a result of this experience, there's just a sense that we all have, but it's become more in tune. I don't have to debate it. I just accept it. It gives me a moment to pause and go, I wonder what that's about, and let it go. I don't have to figure it out. That's the thing. I don't think we have to figure everything out. I think we notice, and we're open to the possibilities, and we can lower our resistance by accepting that all our experiences, I believe, are things we draw to us. And one of the things that pilgrimage has helped me internalize, the spirituality I follow is a Hawaiian tradition called Ho'oponopono. And it literally means to correct an error. But the purpose behind the Ho'oponopono, embracing that, is to take 100% responsibility for yourself. And what I found was pilgrimage gave me the opportunity to take 100% responsibility for myself, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So once I had made this decision, as I said, the universe started lining up for this to happen. And it was 2011, and when I first saw the movie. So my objective was that I don't like to be warm. I don't care for warm weather. And muggy weather just makes me out and out cranky. So I decided that for some reason I had this insight, this inspiration, that I should set my goal to walk in the fall of 2012. And I wanted to be on the Camino for my birthday, which is at the end of September. So anyway, as the universe would have it, 2012 became probably the hardest year of my life. So many things happened on a monthly basis that were huge. If I delineated out every single challenging, what I felt was a horrific thing, you would think I was making it up. I won't go into any detail about it because it doesn't really matter, but it derailed my objective of walking the Camino that year. And so what had happened finally was, one of the final things was that in October, my mom passed away. And she was aging and she was deteriorating. And so she, as I said, she passed away in October. And I come from a large family. I'm the youngest of 6, and we've all multiplied. And so just the immediate family is pretty big. And so my mom had one remaining sibling who was actually older than her. She was 87 when she died. And my uncle was 6 years older than her. My Uncle Frank was 93. And so he came for the funeral, and it was cool and blowy, a beautiful sunny fall day in Michigan. So you can imagine it was very colorful, but it was cool and windy. So we're at the gravesite, and my uncle is just this little peanut now. And he was sitting at right there at the gravesite. And of course they have chairs lined up. And I was on one side of him and his daughter was on the other. So we're in the right front row, right at the gravesite, trying to keep him warm and block from the wind, actually. So all my brothers and my mom's grandsons and one great grandson and son-in-laws are the pallbearers. So they come and they had were carrying the casket and had set it down on the mechanism that lowers the casket down. And they're all big guys, and they're blocking our view. And I was sitting there, thinking about Mom, of course. And one of the things I had said in my eulogy to her was that my mom was like what I call a real woman. She was a product of her time. She had a lot of challenges, of course, raised very working class. She was a hardworking woman. And I call her a real woman because she cooked, she sewed, she canned. Plus, she was an entrepreneur. Her idea of a good time was to wash her windows both sides and take all her curtains down. I didn't get that gene. And she was just a hard-working woman, and she was a very loving mother. And she was the epitome of, I want things for you that I never had. And so I had shared in my eulogy that one time she had said to me, because my first husband was in the military, and I have 3 children, and they were all born in different places. And my mom always came to help with the children. And really, bless her heart, I mean, she wasn't a real traveler. She probably could count on one hand the number of airplanes she'd been on, but she got herself from Michigan to New York City, and I had my first one. And those are some hilarious stories. If you ever want to talk about things our parents said and did and have a good laugh, I got a million stories. And then my second child was born in Germany. And bless her heart, She got herself a passport and got herself to Germany by herself. My third child, born out here in Oregon, of course, she came for that one. And one day she's helping me, and I had 3 kids in 4 years. So it seemed like perpetual diapers and tiny clothes. And so, like I said, a real mom, totally into cleaning, cooking, laundry. That's her idea of a good time to a degree. We're sitting there folding clothes. And she said to me, you know, Pat, if it wasn't for you, or she said, you know, because of you, I've seen the world. Because she traveled, you know, to come and visit me. And, you know, I thought back on that because the first time I got on an airplane, and where I went was to Europe. And I was a junior in high school. There was an opportunity for a club, you know, these language clubs, to take a spring break and travel. And back, I'm showing my age. That spring break trip to Europe cost $350.
Oh my goodness.
Airplane, hotel, food, everything. Exactly.
Days.
And my mom wanted me to have that experience. And so I remember they made $50 payments a month, and that was big, so I could make this trip. Anyway, but she always encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do. She would say to me, Pat, make up your mind. Just decide. Once you decide, you will succeed. She was teaching quantum physics. She didn't even know it. She was just very, very determined kind of person. And there's a great story behind my mom. But anyway, so I was sharing this story when I was eulogizing her. And I said, you know, she said because of me, she saw the world. But the truth is, because of her love and encouragement, I saw the world. Because she kept saying, go, do it, you know, go experience this, experience that. And I never got to do that. Go for it. Make up your mind. Decide. You'll succeed. Because one of the crazy things I did was I joined the Army in 1975, and my dad had a conniption, and my brothers were out of Vietnam and everything, and they were like, are you nuts? Stay in college. And my mom was like, hey, that's what you want to do? Make up your mind.
Well, that's very helpful to, you know, thinking about embarking on doing the spiritual journey like this, you know, to have had that encouragement. Not everybody has that. So it's really great to have that encouragement to, you know, help you kind of get over the hump sometimes. Seems like you had a lot of obstacles thrown in your way that year. And so, that's a test. I mean, sometimes these are just our tests.
Right.
That was probably the beginning of the pilgrimage, was overcoming those obstacles before you even got there, right?
Yeah. Well, in retrospect, you know, like I said in my opening comments, that once you get the inspiration, you hear that voice, that little whisper that says, this is something that you need to do. That is the beginning of your pilgrimage. I didn't realize it at the time.
Amazing.
So anyway, we're sitting at her graveside, and I had been reading about getting books, reading about the pilgrimage, and I knew that the symbol of a pilgrim is a shell. And I don't know, you probably can't see it, but I got a little one. You probably can't see it on my necklace right here.
Yeah, we can see it. It looks like a scallop shell.
Yeah, a little scallop shell.
Yeah.
That's the symbol of a pilgrim. At least the pilgrim, it's a general symbol, particularly to the Camino de Santiago. So,
right. Winston, you mentioned that to me. Sorry, Winston, you've been kind of quiet there. Do you have any comment? I'm sorry, Pat, since Winston, you did mention that to me, Winston. You told me about the shell and that was like the symbol of that particular pilgrimage. Did you have any comments you wanted to make up to this point, Winston?
No, just except you see the scallop shell in history.
Right.
And it puts me in the mind of certain things. And I think I've expressed that in times past, but let's not get me into this conversation. I want to hear the rest of the story.
Okay. Let's hear the rest of the story.
Oh, that's okay. You know, one of the things that there's a lot of interpretations of and stories behind why the scallop shell is the symbol. But anyway, so I had been reading and doing research and things like that, and so I knew about this shell was the symbol. So anyway, we're sitting at my mom's graveside, and all the pallbearers are, standing directly in front of us, and they set my mom's coffin down, and then they all file away. And so I'm at eye level with my mom's coffin. And as they're all filing away, I look, and the brass ornamentation for all the four handles along the side of the coffin is the scallop shell.
That's your mom telling you, go do it.
She was like, do it, go on, make up your mind, do it. Because, that was the time I was supposed to be on the Camino. So the most fascinating thing about that is, I just saw that and I gasped. I was like, I could hear her saying, do it, go, and it kind of made me, of course I felt emotional and tearful about it. But the really fascinating thing is, a few years before, excuse me, my mom had cashed out a small life insurance policy that she had because it was going negative instead of paying. So we were like, Mom, let's close that out. And so she got the money out of it, and she said to me and some of my siblings, just go take care of my funeral arrangements. I don't care. That's for you all, not for me, because I don't really care. So go make the arrangements, because I don't want to burden you kids. I want it all paid for, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, all right. So small group of us went, and I, with my brother, a brother and a sister-in-law, we picked out that casket. And I have no recall of noticing that. So that happened a few years before I even saw that movie. So that really, spoke to me about how, we all have a destiny here. And when we, come to that realization and open ourselves up to what is lining up for us, and not resist particularly change in our lives, our lives can become potentially less burdensome. So anyway, that was 2012. Mm-hmm. And so my birthday had passed. And for me, excuse me.
Sure.
The time that I wanted to go on this pilgrimage had passed. So eventually it was the next year, 2013, that I decided and made the objective, and it happened. So I headed to the Camino in September of 2013. And, but even prior to the literal departure, there were numerous other things that began to speak to me, to affirm and support my decision to go and walk the Camino. One of the things that also I experienced was that when I decided to make this journey, I was sharing it with people. And I was telling them, I've been reading about this. I'm going to go to Spain, and I'm going to start in southwestern France, and I'm going to walk. It's 800 kilometers, almost 500 miles from southwestern Spain, which is the Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port, is in the foothills of the Pyrenees. And that's a very typical, and in fact, it's where Martin Sheen started. And it's the typical place many pilgrims start in that they walk what's called the Camino Frances. And that simply means the French pilgrims, the people who came from France walked along this trail, and that's why they call it the Camino Frances. But anyway, as I was sharing with people that I was going to do this, people started putting up their fears. They were like, "You're going to do what? How far? By yourself? You speak French? You speak Spanish? Aren't you afraid? All alone? Blah, blah, blah." And then I realized I didn't want to take in their stuff. So I stopped telling people.
Ooh.
I only shared it with just a few people who were supportive of me. And of course, in retrospect, and it's not hard for anybody to make this parallel, but the experiences of pilgrimage is like the experiences of life. I mean, I'm sure you've heard people say life is a pilgrimage.
Yes.
It's true. And this was a fundamental in life that I wouldn't have used the word so, what's the term? I can't think of the term, but I mean, I feel like I've internalized this now. I've thought about it. I've said it before. Oh, only surround yourself with people who celebrate you. You know, I'm sure you've heard that, but it's true, because this was a very clear example for me in which when people don't celebrate you, your ideas, your objectives, you need to move on from that relationship, or at least the topic in that relationship. And that was one of my really strong, I didn't realize it at the moment, but in retrospect, in fact, even while I was walking the pilgrimage, that was one of my first pilgrim lessons, that when you're willing to give and share of yourself, and people choose to accept it in a way that's not palatable to you, I can hold on to their intention, right? That we could say that was a concern they had for me, right? But really the reality is it's their fears, because I don't live my life that way. I try not to live in a lot of fear. I'm not saying I don't worry and I have concerns and blah, 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 but I can own that I tend to spend more time thinking about the future than I do about the present time. It's like I'm always planning. I write lists. I have little boxes I like to check off. I'm OCD. I don't like to scratch them out. I'd rather check a box.
Well, it's good that you have, those are your intentions, though. And intentions are what you need to begin to manifest something. You have to have an intention. So if you want to manifest something in the future, you need to start with intention. Winston, we've talked about this, I think, many times on our country roads in different ways. And so that's great.
That's his contribution.
Come on, Arson. Come on, Ancient Order of Ascended Appalachian American. Come on, you've got to have some comments, but we'll wait. I know we've got to get to a little bit more of this, because from our discussions, I mean, from what Winston explained to me, from what our discussions you and I, Pat, have had, this is huge. I mean, you're saying, this is why I'm saying you call it a walking meditation. I never heard that term before, and I loved it. I just thought, wow, if people are really looking for the next level, this is very spiritual, very transformative. You go from, first, let me just ask you this question. How many miles are these pilgrimages? Let's talk about Santiago. How long was that one?
That one, from where I started to where I ended up, is about 800 kilometers, or about 400, and you can do the math. I think 6.2 miles is 10 kilometers. So close to 500 miles. I started in Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port in southern France, the end of September, and about, I think, September 20th, I think I walked out of there, and I walked into Santiago de Compostela on Halloween, on October 31st. So it took me about 6 weeks. I walked an average of, I'd say, 12 to 15 miles a day. And I'm not a fast walker. So one of the fundamentals of pilgrimage, people need to understand, it's not a race. It's not a competition. There are no pilgrim police. You know, nobody's nobody's there to judge you. So, you know, you're everything. And you talked about manifestation. One of the beauties, the privileges, the gifts of pilgrimage is that time, as I said, that you spend walking. I call it life at 3 miles an hour. And I found that the gift I was given, it wasn't what I set out to do, but it didn't take long for the experience to begin, is that when you walk, plus there, I want to, if you can make note, I want to make a distinction between walking a pilgrimage, that particular one, to the Tomb of St. James, and then walking pilgrimage here in the United States, because I've done both. But still, this applies to both. When you slow your life down to about 3 miles an hour, depending on the terrain, you end up spending time alone with yourself. And my experience was that you end up spending a lot of time with the God of your understanding. And the dialogue that goes on can be very profound. It can be very simple. It can feel very momentary, but yet that voice that you're having conversation with is so brilliant. It really, really is. And you learn to be kind and patient and generous with the person you're with when you're all alone. And willing to be as kind and patient and gentle and understanding of yourself as you're willing to be with others can be a profound experience. You know, we say treat others as you'd like to be treated, but I think that if you've been raised in an institutional church, I don't think that we were really taught to love ourselves, to love others as you would love yourself.
No, no. No, I didn't learn that until I read Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life.
Oh, the little blue one? The
that
little
was
blue book?
that was transformational for me.
Mm-hmm.
But this is amazing. This is the real meat of the whole thing, is what the transformation, what happens to you spiritually, physically, emotionally. So first you say there's like 3 stages of the pilgrimage, basically. Like this first stretch, however long that would be, is you have to deal with the physical aspects of the task at hand. And that's different for everybody, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, there's the mental and emotional part, which gets more deeper into, you know, what you're talking about, this conversation that you're having. I can't believe you're having, I mean, I can imagine, I can just hear myself this first, maybe 100 miles or so. I'm like, you're crazy. What are you doing this for? You can't do this. I would be saying this.
The hell was I thinking?
What was I thinking? My ankle hurts, my foot hurts. I'd be like, really, Winston knew that I'm not going to make it to Ascended Hillbillies, but that's okay. But then after you overcome that and you go into the mental part of it and you start thinking and reflecting. I mean, I can only imagine. I used to be a runner, so, I enjoyed spending this time by myself. Sometimes I would run 8 miles, 10 miles, sometimes just 3 miles. But I was in a zone. You get to a zone, you get to a place where your brain's like functioning at another, processing at another level. And then you said it gets into the spiritual component of it. So I'm wondering if you can break down for us these 3 stages. And let me just ask Winston again. Winston, you're the one who told me about this. Just so amazing too. Is there anything that you wanted to comment on so far, Winston?
No, she's the one that told me about it, so let her explain it.
Okay, good. Let's keep going.
Well,
You,
when I shared that with Winston, it was really in reference to, and this was my very first pilgrimage,
mhm,
and it was intense. um, and so where I started out in France, like I said, was in the foothills of the Pyrenees. So that very first day in Saint Jean, um, if anybody has looked into this, there are guidebooks out there, and you really don't even need them. But they're I take it back. It's informational on like where to stay and what the historical things are and blah blah blah. But truly, the Camino de Santiago, there's a story behind it. Back in the 80s, there was a priest who took on this project to a degree of asking the road workers who were painting the yellow stripes on the road, any leftover paint, just a little bit in a can, could he have them? And they were like, sure, could get rid of it. And he got a bunch of students, and they went along the trail and made these yellow arrows. So today, the Camino de Santiago is marked pretty much totally in Spain. I haven't walked in France other than that little town where I started,
mhm.
and you cross the border from France to Spain that same day if you want to. So you're in Spain within the first stage. But there are yellow arrows painted. You just follow the yellow arrows. So the only challenge is if your mind wanders, your feet follow. So if you don't see a yellow arrow at least once every 15 or 20 minutes,
Mhm.
you need to turn around and go back and find one because you've wandered off somewhere. But um, but the first day out of Saint Jean, there's no getting around it. You are walking uphill all day. There's no getting around it. There are two routes out of Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port. One is called the Alpine route, where you go up and then down in that if you walk about, I think it's almost 25 kilometers. That's a long day to go up and then down. And you end up in Roncesvalles, which is the first village in Spain. Or in the movie, because that's literally in the foothills, and in the movie, that's where some fog or snow came in, and he purportedly fell off, which could happen. I'm telling you, it could happen, and was killed. He fell off into a ravine or something. They don't go into detail. It doesn't matter. But there's a second route called the Valcarlos route, and that's a little bit lower elevation. You walk around that hill, that foothill. You walk around that, but ultimately at one point, because I've walked that one as well now, you do have to go up and then down. So there's no getting around it. So anyway,
But that's as you start out. You have this uphill. It's
the
like
very
testing you.
first
It's
day.
testing you. It's like, are
Exactly.
you going to be able to handle this? I mean, if you're
Exactly.
starting out and there's this hill, it's like you're saying to yourself, I mean, not to say that you hadn't started a long time ago when you first started and you first thought about it and all these things were manifesting, like you said, and then all these obstacles came into your way that
Mm-hmm.
first year. It was still preparing you for what you were going to experience, because I mean we're talking endurance, like you never even knew that did you ever know
Exactly.
you had this kind of endurance?
I thought I did, but here is the parallel. We have these concepts, we have these ideas, these objectives, but until you put yourself in the environment in which you experience it to let you know that you are capable, you can do this, it's a concept, So this is what pilgrimage does for you. We have all these ideas and beliefs about ourselves, whether we voice them, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
I think of myself as a patient person, but somebody comes in and tries my patience, and then I have to demonstrate my ability to be patient. And
Hmm.
now I know myself as a patient person.
Hmm.
Prior to that, it was just a concept.
Gotcha.
So in the Ho'oponopono, technically, I need to thank that person for trying my patience because they gave me the opportunity to know myself. And so
Mm.
as a patient person, so I have this idea of myself as you know, I can do this. It's just walking. My goodness, it's one foot in front of the other. How hard can it be? So the first week, I mean, I did a certain amount of training, and I will say a relatively healthy person can do it. As I said, it's not a race. It's not a competition. You know, nobody is judging you.
Mhm.
Every pilgrim's experience is unique unto themselves. And as I said, like the wedding ceremony, there's no right or wrong to it.
Right.
And so the first week, really, the first couple of weeks, I would say, was just building physical endurance. And you stay in what's called albergues or refugios. They're some of them, there are three different kinds. There are private ones that people have just, you know, built or converted part of their home to some rooms, and you pay a certain amount, and sometimes it includes breakfast or dinner or both. And those are private albergues. I'm just going to use the term albergue because that's the most common one.
So it's like just a place to camp out for the night.
Right. And the thing is, and also that term camping, it's not camping, because all you carry on your on your back is what you need to just your clothes, some toiletries. I didn't even carry a sleeping bag, but I did carry a sack. And then there's other kinds. There's I'm forgetting the term. Well, there's parochial. So there are albergues that the Catholic Church has established for 1,000 years. Some of the maybe some of them aren't 1,000 years old, but several hundred years old. And monasteries for monks and nuns were devoted to supporting the pilgrims. And those, when you stay in them, there's also a rule: you can only stay one night.
Right.
So this is not a vacation type thing. So in the parochial ones, they're usually what's called donativo. So you just donate, you just give whatever you feel you can give to have a safe, relatively warm, dry place to stay for the night, take a shower. Sometimes there's a meal, sometimes there isn't, but most of the time there is, and the pilgrims come together and they help prepare it, they help clean it up, and the money you give, there's a host there, and they're called hospitaleros, and the host, hospitality. Hospitaleros,
Yeah.
right.
Now I'm
And
thinking I'm the Italian though. I'm translating, and so go
yeah,
ahead.
the
Go
same,
ahead.
más o menos.
Yes.
And so the hospitaleros take, after the pilgrims leave in the morning, they clean up, they take the donations, and they go buy food for the pilgrims for that day. And then there's the third one, which I'm forgetting the term, but basically it's municipal. Like, so cities or little towns will own some. And so they're like hostels. They're big rooms with bunk beds and you know, they're places to take a shower, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, the first couple weeks, it took me to build my physical endurance. And that was from about Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port to about Burgos. And the terrain was kind of up and down, up and down, up and down. And you walk through villages and some big cities. I think Pamplona and Burgos were the biggest cities. And then right outside of Burgos, took me 2 weeks to get there. And then from Burgos, there's about 100 miles, not kilometers, miles of flat land. It's called the Meseta. And it's farmland, and it's flat. And so for me now, I mean, I got by 2 weeks of walking every day. It's not to say that I didn't wake up and feel a little stiff and all that, but I'm telling you, I put the backpack on, started walking, and within less than 20 minutes or so, you've stretched it all out, and you know,
Right.
you're moving on, you know. And so then once I hit Burgos, it took 2 weeks to get across that 100 miles, almost 2 weeks of flatland. Maybe it's a little more than 100. Probably about, now I think about it, maybe 150. But because it's flat land, now it's the mental discipline, because the terrain doesn't change much. And I mean, it is beautiful in its own way. And so this is what's fascinating. I felt, for me personally, starting that third and fourth week, when I would get up, I mean, it didn't take long to just stretch out myself physically and be walking. And it was like flipping a switch. I could literally walk because I didn't have to really watch my footing and all that much. And it was a lot of small villages. It was like flipping a switch, and I could just, go off into my thoughts. And a good pilgrim, a smart pilgrim, will rest every hour and a half to 2 hours, whether you feel like you need it or not. Because your vehicle is your body. And there is nothing that will make you more grateful, caring, and a feeling of blessedness for your body than walking pilgrimage. It's amazing what your body will do for you.
So your body has to be in pretty good shape, though, to get going.
Again, I would say, I could lose 50 pounds. I don't walk long distances every day. Again, it's up here. It's a decision. Like my mom said, decide, make up your mind, and you'll do it.
Right.
And I did. But I'm not in any great shape. And like you, I used to run too. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Those endorphins hit. And like, oh, geez, I just ran 7 miles. I better turn around and go back,
But in that time, you're thinking in a different way than when you're not running. It's like those endorphins, yes, but it gives you time to allow your high self, your spirit guides to communicate with you in it's just so much more effective, I think. I think your mental power, your mental acumen, I should say, not power, I mean, mental acumen, I think, is sharpened, and it's much more attuned than I'll tell you, couch potato life is not good, but some people, have disabilities, and,
Right.
it's not easy. I'm just saying that if you can physically do it, there's these tremendous benefits. If you're a runner, and if you're a walker, I mean, it's really good for the body. Really good for the mind.
I used to work for an orthopedic surgeon, and he would go after the runners, because they're just hammering their joints.
Oh, yeah.
And he would say,
Go ahead. Sorry.
the human body is designed, we're walkers, we're not runners. And so he said, that's how the body's designed. And so if you're going to keep pounding your joints, you're going to get a certain reception at some point. So walking, sure. People used to walk. That was the MO. We've gotten this love affair with our vehicles, and and public transportation is just really finally coming to this country. If you've traveled in Europe, you can get anywhere on a train. And I lived in Germany a couple of times. That's why I was saying, when I first saw that movie, I was fascinated, because at least in my experience in Germany, you can get anywhere on a train. And when you're old, once you can't really walk as far, you ride a bike. Well, I was fascinated.
So let's get into, so once you get past this physical, because we have to, be mindful of time here. Once we get past the physical aspect of this, and you realize that you can physically do this, I don't know how many miles that takes, but I'm sure it's different for everybody.
Yeah, it is.
Get into this mental process. What happens? What are you thinking about all that time? I mean, aside from looking at how beautiful everything is and watching the people and seeing the customs and what are you really thinking about? What's happening to you at that time?
Well, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to examine your life. Where are you at this stage in your life? and to, comfortably, to a degree, safely do an examination. I think we all need to do that at some point. And what's fascinating is I don't want to give the impression that I was like solitary the whole time. And this is like one of the distinctions I want to make between walking the Camino de Santiago and walking in the United States. Because in Europe, you'll run into a lot of pilgrims because it's very popular. So a lot of your interaction is with other pilgrims. And one of the fascinating things that I experienced is that so you picture yourself walking into a little village, and the pilgrims there are commonplace on this trail, and there's commerce, and there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, that entire city of Santiago de Compostela rose up because of the relics of St. James. So it was commerce. And they found the relics, 1,000 years ago. And so some bishop or somebody came and said, yeah, it's the relics of St. James. So let's build a little chapel. The chapel turned into a church. The church turned into a cathedral. But it took people to make these structures happen. And word got out, and pilgrims started coming, and those pilgrims needed food and clothing and a place to stay. So yeah, commerce happened, and there's nothing wrong with it. And it happens along the way as well. So people make, this pilgrimage is huge in the economy of Spain. So anyway, you picture yourself walking into a small village. They have what they call them bars. They're not like what we would call a bar. What they call a bar, we would call a cafe. They just simply serve beer and wine all the time because it's Europe. But you walk into a small village, you see some backpacks, you just set your backpack outside. Nobody cares. It's safe. Rarely does thievery happen. And so other pilgrims are in there, or there's tables outside, you're sitting down, and you think nothing of going up if there's not any empty chairs, but there's a table, two people sitting there, one empty chair, and say, hey, can I join you? That's Europe. That's just the way it is. You think nothing of it. But the amazing thing is, I would be contemplating something. And I walk into a small village and say, hey, mind if I join you? Sure, go ahead. Throw my pack down, go get something to drink. And I was really into the fresh orange juice. And sit down with these people. Hi, I'm Pat. Hi, and then the basic thing everybody says, oh, where are you from? How long you been on the Camino? Where'd you start? That kind of thing. Conversation will start. And then somebody will make a comment in the discussion in reference to what I was thinking about. And it's like, it's like I was contemplating a little bit in a quandary or questioning. And then the conversation will be, unbeknownst to them, totally related to what I'd been thinking about.
That's
do
awesome.
I bring it up? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So it stands to reason that if you have that experience when people talking with total strangers, that whatever the discussion is in relation to what you are contemplating, that when you share with somebody, you are giving some kind of insight to them as well. So I feel like what happens a lot is you are really compelled to be, what's what pilgrimage does. It sets up an environment for you to be authentic. Because what do you really think? And of course, kindness matters. Kindness always matters. It doesn't matter the language, the customs, the dress, the food, a smile, learning to say, please, thank you, excuse me. It's just very basic. It always, always matters. And so it stands to reason that you do the same thing for someone else. And I feel like my sense from having walked the Camino is that you have these momentary relationships. You meet, and I made friends with people. Um, you don't walk with someone else most of the time, unless, I mean, not to say people don't go there with a friend, a spouse, whatever, but most of the time, unless you train together and really walk together and have the same pace, you're not going to walk together. And
Right.
that's okay, because like life, you can't slow yourself down. You can't to meet someone just to be with someone else. And you can't speed yourself up just to be with someone else. You are who you are, because it's damaging. And I experience that all the time. I mean, I would walk a little bit with somebody and I would have to change my pace to have the conversation. But I'm conditioned now in my mind that that's not my pace. It's temporary to meet someone's pace and to be with them where they're at that moment.
Mhm.
That's okay, but it's not me.
It's like jogging with a friend. I used to jog with a friend all the time, and you can have certain kind amount of conversation, but not always. I mean, sometimes you can't have that conversation. That's lovely. Let me just move into the next phase when it becomes, when you've gone through all this examination of your life, you've overcome, however many miles you walked, you've overcome the physical aspect of it, and you build your endurance to make it. A lot of it's mental, as you were saying,
Hmm.
because you've already set your goal mentally. So if you're that driven and focused, that goal, your mind's going to follow. So then you go into the the examination portion, as you said, and you may come out with, I suppose, some. It's great that you highlighting these little, I would say, mini relationships or mini, experiences as you go along the way, because, as you said, many people will echo certain aspects of the things you're thinking of, the things you're contemplating, whatever's going on. And um, then there's, so then you go into this examination phase, and you're going through all these aspects. I mean, I guess you get clarity on decisions that you're going to be making, and it kind of helps you on a mental level to get more clarity. Is that what happens
Hmm.
in that? And then,
Well, I would just say that, the mental discipline, definitely, I mean, of the endurance that it takes to continue on. I mean, I think I had like one moment there, I will have to admit it, and in fact, it was towards the end, actually, where I thought to myself, it was the one day that I walked completely in pouring rain.
ooh,
And I thought, what the heck am I doing? What is this? But other than that, when I hit and now I just want to say that what I'm referring to here is when I walked the Camino de Santiago. This was my
right.
first pilgrimage,
Mhm.
and 6 weeks. So the last 2 weeks, I feel like, physically I had it down. Mentally, I got through that whole, the meseta, the flatland. And one of the things that I experienced walking through the meseta, I started realizing it's like my powers of manifestation got heightened. It was like when I realized there was something I thought I needed, or I was out, whatever, it was like I could think about it and it would happen. And it started kind of making me laugh. So I was messing with it. And just to give you an example, I'm not an early riser. I'd be one of the last pilgrims out, and I thought, I don't have to be like everybody else. That's the point. You get to be there and get to know yourself better, experience yourself in other ways, about being open to inspiration, conversation, other people, realizing that these relationships, these friendships that you make, they're momentary. You may never see these people again, these other pilgrims I'm talking about
Right.
primarily. And that's okay, because every relationship that you make is a sacred relationship. And if
Right.
you approach that approach your interactions in that way, they're so much more meaningful.
Right.
And it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to get everybody's address and email and send them a card. It's not like that. And so one day I thought to myself, I got up late and I'm gluten intolerant, so the food, blah, blah, blah. And so I love breakfast. And so I'm walking into this village and I would play this game that I called Please Jesus, Thank You, Jesus. And something awesome would happen. I'd be like, thank you, Jesus. And I walking into this village and I thought, and it's like pushing 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you know Europe, things shut down from about 2 to 4 or 5 o'clock and they don't care. It's their shutdown time. You can you see them inside the bar talking to their buddies, drinking a beer, and the door's locked, and you're knocking, going, "Hey, man, I just want something," and they just say no, and they turn their back. And they don't care if you have money. They do not care. That's not what that time is for.
Right.
And so anyway, it's getting close to that time, and I'm thinking to myself, please, Jesus, all I want is some eggs and sausage. And I'll be damned. I walked into this village and there was a sandwich sign sitting on the ground in English that said breakfast served all day.
Oh my goodness.
I started laughing. Exactly. And I felt like God was saying to me, God, give me a challenge,
Oh, that's wonderful. And then so you have this so wonderful, wonderful things happen along the way. And then you go into the last 200 miles, which would you say would focus more on the spiritual.
Well,
What happens by the time, because I know sometimes when I was jogging, I would set my mind out to go jogging. Today I'm going to do 5 miles, when I'd get there. And I can tell you after 3, there was times I was just like, I can't do it. And I had to quit after 3. Like, it not happen often, but it's like sometimes you can set your mind on something and then you just can't go the 100%. So sometimes it changes your plan, your idea of what you want to do, because sometimes your body's just saying, we're not going to do that. But the spiritual, I want to try to get to the spiritual and try to wrap this whole thing up, because I think, because the reason people do this ultimately is what's going to happen at the end, and how are you going to, does it change how you see yourself? Does it change how you view, how you interact with other people? What does this do overall once you get to where you say, I'm finished, I completed what I need to do? What happens? What is that spiritual? What is that spiritual experience for you?
Well, to me, the spiritual aspect of pilgrimage, my first one was the last 2 weeks, however many miles it was, when I got into Galicia. And then the hills and valleys started again, like life. You get a break and then it starts again. Only this time, physically I was conditioned, mentally I was conditioned, and then I realized that I can do this. It doesn't matter the hills and valleys, the flatlands. God is there for me. I simply need to ask. Ask and you'll receive. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be opened. It's a matter of having faith, which I just experienced in myself, to get through. And I started, finding meaning in everyday moments. I felt more in tune to what everyday miracles are going on around us all the time. We just take things for granted.
Right.
And so, yes, did I look at the world in a different way? Absolutely. Pilgrimage is a gift that keeps on giving. To slow your life down to 3 miles an hour, to know that all you need, you carry on your back, and to know and believe and experience and trust that the world is going to show up for you. And it does. So since then, I've walked pilgrimage here in the United States. And I've had many people say, oh, well, particularly pilgrims who have walked in Europe. And they go, I've had people say, well, isn't there pilgrimage here in the United States? You have to go all the way to Europe. Pilgrimages, this is what the pilgrims used to do 1,000 years ago. It was from their front door, and it was a round trip. We fly somewhere to Europe. I still have to fly somewhere to walk here in the States.
Sure.
But people's fears came up. Oh, you can do that in Europe. You can't do it here in the States, though. There's no infrastructure like it is there. But the truth is, I've walked a few pilgrimages now. I've walked in New Mexico. I've walked in New York. I just got back from Missouri, Kansas. I walked 325 miles across the state of Missouri. My destination was the shrine of St. Rose Philippine Duchesne, a French nun who came here 200 years ago this year to work with the natives. We have 10 canonized people in the Catholic Church, and she's one of them. But the point of it is that you can walk pilgrimage here in the United States. People are good people. You decide in your mind based on your experiences. When I hear people say to me, oh, but in the States it would be so different because this could happen. It's much more dangerous. And I would say to them, well, have you walked in the United States? Have you walked? Well, no. I said, you're making an assumption about an entire country of people. And if we don't interrupt assumptions, they become facts.
Yeah.
And the truth is, my experience has been people are good people. I'm not minimizing anybody's negative experiences by any stretch of the imagination. It's no different here. The same thing could happen in Europe.
Right.
You just have to be aware and be conscious.
But you're saying, though, I mean, so in Spain, you know, there's a path that it's very common for people to do this. If they say, you know, I'm pilgrim, do you have a room for the night or whatever? These are people who are very familiar with this. And you're saying in the United States, it's really something that you that's pre-planned, and that you make arrangements with churches. So you usually, the pilgrims can have an idea of where to stop along the way when they need to. So that's a really important aspect. I wanted to screen share for our viewers really quick a website that you shared with me, and I wanted to actually start it over because I wanted you to see the beautiful picture, which of course was blocked by all of our pictures here. But this is a website. Do you want to explain what this website is about?
Sure. This is my little consulting organization called Peregrinity. And what I have here are pictures from my experience walking the Camino. And what I like to offer people is that people who are interested in pilgrimage have primarily heard about the Camino de Santiago. I totally encourage people to have that experience. I'm open to doing some consulting with them, help them prepare prior to walking and then how to prepare for it, and then actually even be available afterwards. Because once you walk a pilgrimage, your view changes. Your interactions with people change. And sometimes you need other pilgrims to talk to share what that was about for you. And because some people, they can't fathom it, and the negative stuff comes up. Another website I would like to have you share with people is societyofservantpilgrims.com. The woman who has this website, her name is Anne Sieben, like the 7 in German, Sieben. Yeah. And she's known as the Winter Pilgrim. She's my mentor.
Okay.
And she's the one who has helped organize these pilgrimages in the US. And she goes and explores them, and then she has on her website the trails. And if you're interested in either joining one that she's organized, or you want to walk it on your own, you can contact her on the website, and then she will share with you the contact information of the places along the way. So the point being is that pilgrimage can be done anywhere. The distinction between walking the one in Europe, where there's an infrastructure and ready for pilgrims to a degree, there we are. I mean, that was the one we just walked in Missouri.
That's a
I'm
serious
taking the
backpack.
picture, so I'm not in a lot of
Those
them.
backpacks,
Yeah.
though. I mean, you got to carry that the whole way. Everything
They're
got to
not
be in
very
your bag.
big.
What about porta
Well,
potties and stuff?
the
I mean,
world
let's
is your litter box.
the world is your litter box. So, I mean, I would have a porta potty because I have kids and we always
Yeah.
have porta potties. Okay. I'm
But
sorry. Go ahead.
the point I'm trying to make is that here in the States, people are very open to hosting pilgrims. We're like unique. They even, like when I walked in upstate New York, we only walked 100 miles or so. It took us a week to walk from Oneida to Fonda. We walk an average of about 12 miles a day. And think about it, that's not that far. You
Yeah.
know, an average person can walk 3 miles in an hour. And the pack is not, you're not camping. So you're just taking maybe a sleeping bag, one change of clothes, some toiletries. One guy in that picture, he just had an old fashioned camping backpack. So it's all framed and everything. It was half empty. He just
Can't,
didn't want to get a
can't you
small
like pull something along on wheels? Can't you have a suitcase on wheels or something?
You
Or
could, it could be a little arduous.
when I said that to Winston, he's like, "You're not going to make it into the Ascended Master Hillbillies." I'm
Yeah.
like, "I know."
But one thing I would like to say before we close is that this pilgrimage we just did we started in Mound City, Kansas, and it took us a week to walk to the trailhead of the Katy Trail, which is one of those rails to trail systems. So it's totally flat. It's graded. It's just a little gravel road. Usually it's primarily used by bikers, and it goes across the entire state of Missouri.
Wow.
And that is going to happen again October, November. You can get information on Anne's website. It was a wonderful experience. And yes, we did stay at churches, I'd say half Catholic, the other half Protestant, a couple community centers, but it's not about apostolizing.
Right.
What it is, it's about us having the human experience of trust and welcoming. People were so trusting and so welcoming to us. People are good people. And
Right.
this is one of the points of pilgrimage, is for everyone has their own unique experience, but for a pilgrim to be able to speak from their own heart, their
Right.
own experience, that the world is good, it's safe, people are welcoming, and we create trust. And as Anne likes to say, trust is a foundation of peace. And that is what we want to not only share, but experience. When you have experienced in your life strangers, we're all pilgrims, we're all strangers. And that's what pilgrimage does. We have a lot of stuff going on in the world now, which I won't go down the political road,
Yep.
about strangers in our country. But once you hone it down to your personal experience, you find we're all strangers, and we all have the ability to be authentic in the world, to have those momentary experiences, and to be able to then share with others that the world's a great place.
Can you pack on these?
Can you pack? What do you mean?
What do they say? Can you pack? What's the expression? Can you pack heat? You know what that means? Can you carry?
Oh, no.
Do you sound
We
like?
don't live in fear like that.
Well, you don't live in fear when you have one because it's all taken care of.
Yeah,
you plan
it's
for
not necessary.
anticipate for that kind of outcome. No.
Well, I think if
people.
if you think about that, you're going to draw it to you.
Okay.
So what we think about is how good and kind and welcoming people are.
Right.
Because they are, and that's been our experience. We leave early in the morning. The objective is to be at our goal by mid-afternoon. We're not walking at night. We're not walking. I mean, it's no different than any place else. Use your common sense.
True. Now, Winston's also mentioned, Winston, you were telling me something, I think even just today, about the popularity of these pilgrimages. You had said something. What were you telling me today?
Well, yeah, perhaps Pat can explain that.
Okay.
Some of these have become so popular that they have to limit the amount of people that are actually on in some of the European things. Maybe
Is
Pat
that
could
right?
explain that.
So is there like a lottery or something? what was happening?
Well, there's rumor going on. It's that the Camino Frances, the one that I walked in 13,
Hmm.
that movie made it really popular here in the United States. But when I walked it, I met people from all over the world.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's really wearing. But that particular one, um, there's belief that it's right below a ley line. I learned that from Shirley MacLaine's book. But when you think of Spain, there's about three major pathways that pilgrimages, trails that ultimately to Compostela, which is in the northwest corner of Spain. There's one main trail up Portugal. There's a couple small ones called the Camino Inglés, where the English pilgrims came down to walk to the tomb of St. James. There's about three major ones through France. So those are all going to the Camino de Santiago. There are three main Christian pilgrimages to the Camino de Santiago, the other one to Rome, and the third one to France. But pilgrimage is a tradition in many religions. Muslims, once in their life, they're supposed to make it to Mecca.
Right.
When I walked to the shrine, the Santuario de Chimayo in New Mexico, that is the most visited sacred site in the United States. We started in San Luis, Colorado, walked southwesterly, took us a week to get there. And what we did was we had to walk, get with permission, through the Taos Pueblo tribal land. So we contacted them, and I'm here to tell you, Louisa, they were waiting for us. They were excited to meet us. It was so honoring. It was so humbling because they were fascinated that here are a couple of non-native people walking a pilgrimage to one of what they consider their sacred shrines or sites. But the fiscale is a person who's like an intermediary, like a liaison between the tribal and actually the Catholic Church, because there is a Catholic Church on the Taos Pueblo site there. But the fiscale, he met us, took us out to dinner, and he was so interested because pilgrimage is part of their tradition, and they didn't realize that people outside of native culture did it. So it's really an activity, for lack of a better term, that crosses many cultural, I don't want to call them boundaries, but what am I trying to say? Cultural bridges. It's a cultural bridge.
Well, you started this interview out talking about it's for, it's about a human being. It's about you as a human being. And so then why wouldn't it bridge all the cultures together? And, because it's an experience as a human that you go through, and it has nothing to do with your, nationality, has nothing to do with your politics. It has nothing
Exactly.
to do with your religion even, unless, because it's a process that you go through. I mean, it's about spirituality. It's about your own sense of spirituality, whatever that may be. It may be, religious in some contexts, but it's just been wonderful having you, Pat. I have to tell you how absolutely, thrilled I was to do this interview and to get this out, because it's something I know that I would want to do. It's something that I think that, in the busy hustle and bustle of taking care of our lives and living our lives and not having time to stop and think about and really do the kind of reflection we need, this gives you a chance to be with yourself and develop that relationship
Right.
with yourself in the multiple ways that happens and unfolds, doing this kind of self journey. So it just seems like something I would want to do. I don't know if my ankle would be up for it, but something that I might be much slower at doing. I've had a few reconstructive surgeries on my ankle, so who knows. But you did, say that you were going to, at one point you were trying to organize one for for handicapped individuals, and
Hmm.
there was some, common logistics were a little bit more difficult with that. And when that happens, if that ever does come together, would you let us know and we'll post that, please? Because that just sounds like
Sure. Yeah, the
really
one
wonderful.
actually, the one in that's happening again in October, November across Kansas and Missouri. What's great about it is it's totally flat. In fact, we have just talked to a couple of people, one lady in a wheelchair and another person with another disability. Anne is a wonderful person. She has a personal motto that she says when she leads a group or organizes, that no pilgrim is left behind. When she explored that particular one, I couldn't go that spring for other reasons, but she was accompanied by an 80-year-old man who just had a defibrillator put in, and a 78-year-old man also. So, again, it's a decision. And when you become part of this group that Anne leads, she does a wonderful job of planning ahead, looking forward, and we are really encouraging people who feel like they physically can't do this, something like this. This is the ideal trail to do it at. And the other beautiful thing is like not everybody can take 4 weeks off,
Right,
right, to
right.
do a complete pilgrimage. Well, this one on the Katy Trail has a couple places like at Jefferson City. I can't think of these other places where you could take Amtrak, and then where we stay, you could hop on right there. That fellow that was in the picture, he joined us in Jefferson City and just walked the final week with us. So there are different places along the way you could join us.
Well, that's
So
wonderful. And I think it would be, some people might want to think about doing smaller ones first and work their way up to the bigger ones like Santiago,
mhm.
things like that. And I know just from driving cross country, you can go days without a place to stop. So it's very interesting to see how to handle the United States, because if you're going to go across these, very large, it's very flat and it's all just there's really not a lot out there. So, I think it would be harder to do cross country in, do these in the United States. So they would have to be, I guess you have them designed so that you do hit some towns once in a while.
Oh yeah, it is. Yes, I mean, you know
We've
what?
got lots and lots of open space here. Yeah.
Like I said, the average is about 13 miles a day, 13.1 half marathon. I think the longest day was 17. There were some that were 9 and 10 because that's just the way where the churches
Hmm.
and the communities where we could stay lined up. So the experience of walking in the United States is more of a true traditional pilgrim experience, because that's what your interactions, like during the day, we all start off the same spot, but we don't walk the same pace. But you're just on a flat trail. You can't get lost. You just walk east. There's no turning, nothing. You just stay on it. But the other significant pilgrim experience is the interactions with our hosts in the evening. They're fascinated by us, and they say, oh, I could never do that, I could never do that. And we're like, it's
Right,
just walking. It's one foot in front of the other. We
right.
had a 80-year-old with a pacemaker do it last time. And the people I walked with this in Missouri this last time, there was a woman who did have a bit of a slower pace. She kind of lumbered
Right.
when she walked, but it doesn't matter. It's like parallels to the uniqueness of each of us, just who we
Right.
are. And she knew her abilities, she knew her pace. She also knew she was a part of a community of people that were there for her energetically, yes, physically,
Mhm.
but yet emotionally and spiritually. We're all there for each other, just as we could and should be in
Mhm.
the world.
Well, Pat, that just sounds so wonderful, and I think somehow through osmosis I was getting the experience of it through you, because I can almost imagine what I mean. You start out at the same place, and then you don't walk at the same pace, so you're there then with you end up catching up with a different group of people. It's almost like then you start out your next day with a different group of people, or, not like you're with them walking, but you kind of, maybe leave together, you interact, and then you don't walk at the same pace, and then you mix with another group of people. It just seems like and you're all on this personal journey, and you're all going through your own things, and it just would be so amazing to be there at night with a little camera trying to get pictures, not pictures, but like testimony. I'd be there with my Goldfish report, getting testimony from people about their journey and what they, if anything that they would want to share. Just seems like really an incredible experience, and I'm really so glad that you shared it with us, because I think that, as you called it, a walking meditation. I mean, it's far more than a meditation, but it just seems like it does so much to enrich the individual spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, that there's just so many benefits from it. And obviously, you are here to tell us about that. So thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure. And let me just ask you if there was any final comments. I think we covered all the points we wanted to make here. Was there any final comments that you had, that you wanted to make for our viewers that we didn't talk about?
Well, I just would like to say that, in pilgrimage, what happens is you end up being part of a community that's willing to care for each other. And in Europe, you meet pilgrims from all over the world. And like you had said, you start off and you meet different pilgrims along the way. The pilgrimage in the United States is different. We've walked as a group. We're the same group walking along the way. But what's different is that our pilgrim message gets relayed more to our hosts in the evening, that they can open the door to strangers. We can have that momentary experience. They share with us who they are, their life. We share with them what we're doing, who we are. We're ordinary people taking some time to be in community with the group. We've heard, we've been inspired in some way, and maybe for them, they've got some other kind of inspiration going. But the meeting someone who has had the courage to listen to that calling. It's not something you're going to do every day. It's just a moment, really, in relation to everything. It's a moment in time, but it's a wonderful gift that we give to ourselves, that we give to our hosts, and ultimately because we have given them the experience of opening the door to a stranger and having a positive experience, that they too can turn and tell someone, yeah, I didn't know this person. And they came, we stayed in people's private homes as well. And they shared with us, wow, you don't even know these people. And you know what they said? They said, I just felt that this was okay. So they listened to their feelings, they listened to their heart. So what I say is, if pilgrimage interests you, just like it did for me, I got a little, just listen to that small voice inside. Don't push hard on it. Just be open to the thoughts and the inspirations that come, and you'll know, and then you'll see that that's life. When you have that experience, you'll start looking at your life that way, listening to your heart, and making the decisions from there.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Pat. And, it's definitely, it's not the same as, meeting friends on Facebook that you don't know. It's really not. And this is really about meeting people in real life and sharing an experience. Like you said, the hosts will have one reason for why they do what they do, and you have your reason. And for whatever that is, it just comes together. And so this is, in most cases, prearranged places that people have agreed to come to. Because Winston asked me if someone would come knocking at my door and said they were a pilgrim, would I let them stay? And I said no, because I'm in Jersey. Come on, are you kidding
Now
me?
stop stereotyping people in New Jersey.
But, I'm from Jersey, so it's kind of like what I would say, But because I was raised Catholic, but I was a cafeteria Catholic. I didn't know about pilgrimages, so I didn't really, that's why I said, well, I don't know, I don't know if I would trust them You know, but if
I
I
have,
do my church, I would have like no problem. But
but
like,
you know what, Louisa, I have to
like,
say,
I don't know. I don't think I could do it. Yeah.
that's funny you say, I'm from Jersey, I can't do it. You know what? Ann Sieben,
Yeah.
she's from New Jersey.
Oh, great.
And that's why people
Jersey
say to her, how can you do this? You're not afraid. She goes, hey, I'm from Jersey.
girl.
And that's
Right.
her answer.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
See how the universe lines up for us?
Right, right. Well, no, because I'm just saying it's not something that's common here and you don't normally hear about it. So that's kind of why it's not like there's anything wrong with doing it in New Jersey or anything. It's just that it's not familiar to us. So, you know, if somebody knocks on your door and you're not expecting them, you don't answer it. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
You take your chance answering the door because, you know, Girl Scouts can't come back anymore. You can't have kids going door to door. No trick-or-treating is outlawed. I mean, it's like nobody really walks to your house anymore. It's like political correctness craziness, you know? So, you know, but putting all that aside, going
yeah.
inside. This is about going inside. That's what it's about.
Well, to a degree, it is going inside, but then listening to that
Yeah.
and taking that sense of trust and well-being and living it.
Right.
It's living it by going out. And so I've been walking in many states now. And so New York, come on.
Yeah.
And working class, former, what were the companies up there? We walked the Erie Canal towpath.
Mm-hmm.
So we walked through a lot of very working class, small towns. And Louisa, people are good people.
Oh yeah, people are good people once they can trust you.
But that's it. You don't know
that trust, right? You
don't know until you try.
Right.
And so our hosts do the same thing. They ask themselves inside, who am I? You know, who am I in light of this? And
exactly.
so they have to listen. You know, have we had people say no? Have we had people say, I don't think so? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But we don't take it personally.
Sure.
And we know, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but we know that unfortunately they just missed out on a good experience. But you know what? It's not their time.
Right.
And
exactly.
that's okay. Because many more people say yes than they say no.
Well, that's wonderful and lovely. And Pat, it was such a pleasure to have you on Goldfish Report. Thank you so much for joining us. And Winston, did you have any comments or anything that you'd like to say?
No, just that, you know, we hear so much from me or Jim or some of the different ones. That's always a good, you know, pleasant experience to hear some of these things. So we you know, trying to broaden our experience for people on Goldfish with, you know, getting, you know, Scott to talk to us, and now here Pat's, you know, brought us something that most people probably never even heard of. But I think we've all been, you know,
especially if you're from Jersey,
by this conversation today. So that's what we're trying to do. I'm just a facilitator. I can't do pilgrimages and stuff like that, but I can bring somebody who can.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Winston. And you brought us Scott and you brought us Pat to talk about this wonderful experience. I think, you know, definitely, like you said, Pat, on the bucket list to do. And maybe some people might need to start out with smaller ones and work their way up to bigger ones, but whatever that is. And if people do want information, I am going to include those links in the description section of the video. So they will be there for you for your reference. And you can call Pat. She can help you out with that. And Ann can help you out or however you want to do that. So Pat, thank you so much for joining us on the Goldfish Report. And Winston, thank you for being there with us and bringing this wonderful information to us again. And we will see all of you next time. And this concludes this edition of the Goldfish Report.